The mysterious world of the Khazars, an ancient civilization that's full of surprises. Imagine a time when they guarded the Silk Road, a hub of trade, and lived in the cosmopolitan capital of Atil. This place had it all: Jewish, Muslim, Christian, and pagan communities all coexisting. But here's the twist. Most folks in Atil lived in nomad tents, and the exact location is still a mystery. What's even cooler is their open-mindedness about religion. They let each religious group do their own thing, which was pretty rare back then. Now, where did they come from? That's a puzzle. Were they Turkic or something else? Their language is a mystery too. Stay tuned as we uncover the secrets of the Khazars in bite-sized chunks. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss a thing. The Khazar Empire was a diverse mix of nomadic tribes and peoples who came together under Turkic leadership. These Turkic groups, like the Oghuric peoples, have a rich history dating back to the 4th century CE. They originated from Mongolia and South Siberia after the decline of the Hunnic and Xiongnu nomadic polities. This diverse tribal federation, possibly including Iranian, Proto-Mongolic, Uralic, and Paleo-Siberian clans, achieved a significant victory over the Roran Kaganate in 552 and expanded westward, absorbing other steppe nomads and peoples along the way. It's intriguing to think that the ruling family of this confederation might have hailed from the Ashina clan of the Western Turkic Khaganate. While there's some skepticism about this connection, the similarities in Chinese and Arabic reports make it a compelling theory. The possibility that their leader could have been Yipi Shikui adds another layer of mystery to this historical puzzle. As they moved west, they even encountered the Akatziroi, who were crucial allies of Byzantium against Attila's army. Now, let's travel back in time to the early 7th century, when something fascinating was happening in the land of Khazaria. It all began around 630, when Khazaria started to take shape after the fall of the big Gökturk Kaganate. Before that, Gökturk armies had been making waves along the Volga River since 549, pushing out the Avars and forcing them to seek refuge in the Hungarian plain. Around 552, a new player entered the scene, the Ashina clan. They toppled the Rorans and established the Gökturk Kaganate, proudly calling themselves Türer Ak. By 568, these Gökturks were even thinking of teaming up with Byzantium to challenge Persia. Fast forward a few decades, and an internal war erupted between the eastern and western Gökturks. This dispute happened after the death of Taspar Kagan and caused a dynastic crisis. It's like a family feud, right? By the early 7th century, things were looking more stable in the western part of the Ashina territory. But after the death of their leader, and with the help of the Byzantines, they faced pressure from the Tang dynasty in the east. Eventually, they split into two groups known as the 10 Arrows. Meanwhile, in the west, two new nomadic states emerged: Old Great Bulgaria under Kubrat and the Nushibi sub-confederation. The Khazar Khaganate, under the Ashina dynasty, was also on the rise. They managed to conquer the lower Volga region and some areas between the Danube and the Dnieper. The Khazars' power solidified between 630 and 650, becoming the successor to the Gökturk Khaganate. This period was a time of trade and diplomacy, with Khazaria becoming a hub for merchants from all over Western Eurasia. They even had a reputation for maintaining peace, which historians call the Pax Khazarica. The Khazar rulers had an interesting system of dual kingship, with a Shad Bek and a Kagan. This setup might have been connected to their conversion to Judaism. The lesser king took care of military matters, while the greater king had more of a sacred role. The greater king was selected from the Khazar nobility and had some unique initiation rituals. In the 8th century, both the lesser king and the greater king converted to Judaism, while the rest of the Khazars probably stuck to their old Turkic religion. In Khazaria, the ruling class was a relatively small group that was ethnically and linguistically distinct from the majority of their subjects, who were Alanoes and Oghuric Turkic tribes. The Khazar Khagans, who ruled Khazaria, had a Khwarezmian guard corps known as the Ursiya for protection, but they also hired mercenaries when needed. At the height of their power, the Khazars had a centralized fiscal administration and a standing army of 7,000 to 12,000 troops, which could be increased significantly by calling upon reserves from noble retinues. Some sources even suggest a permanent standing army of up to 100,000 soldiers. They controlled and collected tribute from numerous nations and tribes in a vast territory spanning from the Caucasus to the Ukrainian steppes. Local settlements were governed by officials called tuduns, and there were other dignitaries in the Khazar government with unclear roles, like Jawishigir and Kundur. The Khazar population was ethnically diverse, comprising around 25 to 28 distinct ethnic groups in addition to the ruling elite. There's mention of a possible distinction between white Khazars and black Khazars, although this might be more related to social class than race. Some historical accounts describe the Khazars as having a white complexion, blue eyes and reddish hair. The Khazars were known for their active involvement in trade, importing and exporting goods along with taxing trade routes. They had a unique domestic economy, combining pastoralism, agriculture, fishing, and craft manufacturing. They were also significant suppliers of slaves to the Muslim market. Khazaria had two distinct areas, Atil in the west, where the elite resided, and Itil in the east, which was more diverse in terms of its population. Customs duties were imposed on traders, and tribute and tithes were collected from various tribes and regions. Trade disputes were resolved by a commercial tribunal in Atil, with representation from different religious groups. In their interactions with Byzantium, the Khazars sometimes formed alliances and fought common enemies, demonstrating their strategic importance in the region. These alliances often involved marriages between Khazar royalty and Byzantine emperors. By the 8th century, the Khazars had a dominant presence in Crimea and even extended their influence into the Byzantine-held Cherson. Khazar and Farganian mercenaries served in the Byzantine Hetaerea bodyguard. During the 7th and 8th centuries, the Khazars engaged in a series of wars with the Umayyad Caliphate and its successor, the Abbasid Caliphate. These conflicts involved battles and territorial shifts, but ultimately resulted in intermittent peace. In the late 8th century, the Khazars temporarily accepted Islam and came under the Caliphate's rule, but this arrangement was short-lived, and they soon reasserted their independence. The Khazars' adoption of Judaism around 740 is seen as a way to assert their independence and avoid being under the influence of both Byzantium and the Caliphate. In the years that followed, the Khazars and the Arabs had limited military conflicts due to various factors, including internal strife among the Arab rulers. Relations between the Khazars and the Abbasids improved with diplomatic ties and even royal marriages, but were eventually strained due to raids and territorial disputes. Around 830, some Khazar tribes joined the Hungarians and migrated to the Etelkoz region, becoming neighbors with the Varangians and Eastern Slavs. These Khazars eventually converted to Christianity. In the 9th century, something fascinating was happening in the lands of the Varangian Rus. These resourceful folks were on a quest, sailing south along the waterways that were controlled by the Khazars and the Volga Bulgarians. Their motivations? Well, it was a mix of things. First, they were enticed by the Arab silver that flowed northwards through the Khazarian Volga-Bulgarian trading zones. And second, they had their eyes set on trading furs and ironwork. As they journeyed, they didn't go unnoticed. The northern merchant fleets passing through Atil, much like those in Byzantine Cherson, had to pay tithes. Their presence sparked an interesting development, the formation of a Rus' state. It seems they convinced the Slavs, Merja, and the Chud to join forces against Khazarian demands for tribute. Some argue that this Rus' state was inspired by the Khazarian model, and by the 830s, a Varangian chieftain might have even taken on the title of Kagan. This title persisted and became associated with the princes of Kievan Rus, centered in Kyiv. To safeguard against emerging threats from the Varangians in the north and the Magyars on the eastern steppe, the Khazars built the Sarkel fortress and started minting their own coins in the 830s. By 860, the Rus had ventured as far as Kyiv and Constantinople, making alliances that could be quite flexible. Sometimes, Byzantium would support Khazaria against Varangian Rus' raiders, and at other times, Khazaria allowed the northerners to pass through its territory in exchange for a share of the spoils. As we entered the 10th century, the Khazars found themselves in a tough spot, facing challenges from nomadic incursions and uprisings by former clients and allies. The stability of their tributary empire, known as the Pax Khazarica, was crumbling as steppe Pechenegs and a rising Rus power squeezed them from different directions. Sviatoslav I was the one who finally shattered Khazar imperial power in the 960s. His campaigns overwhelmed Khazar fortresses, including Sarkel and Tamatarka, and reached as far as the Caucasus and back to Kiev. Sarkel fell in 965, and Atil, the Khazar capital, followed shortly thereafter in 968 or 969. The Rus's chronicle even links the end of Khazar traditions with Vladimir's conversion in 986. It's quite a story. Khazaria's influence persisted in some ways, leaving traces in the rise of neighboring states and their traditions. But the Khazar kingdom as we knew it faded into history, leaving only remnants in folklore and some scattered communities with Jewish ties.